It's good news that's spread from one generation to the next, and now it's our turn. One way to tell this extraordinary news to others is by simply wearing and sharing our colorful He Lives Easter buttons. Get your pack of 10 today at afastore.net.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to this brand new edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. I am your congenial, convivial, and amiable host, Brian Fisher. Good to have you in the conversation. The program is Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio, and you are listening to the American Family Radio Network.
What happened to effervescent?
Ah, it's back. It's back. I don't know where it went. It just slipped my mind, but effervescent. And as Jeff reminds me, effervescent as always.
As always.
Now, you could check with the executive producer of the program, and she would verify that I'm always up, always cheerful, never grumpy, never in a bad mood, never abrupt, never short. And if you believe that, the executive producer might want to have a heart-to-heart chat with you and get your mind right. Well, let's go to Psalm 49, which is where our reading has taken us. The schedule is pray.afa.net. Again, you're looking for a reading schedule. It takes you all the way through the Word of God, from beginning to end in an orderly fashion, not consecutive, but in an orderly fashion over the course of 3 years. Most people have not read through the Bible ever. Let's give you a chance to do it in 3 years. It's a bite-sized chunk every day. You know, you will read parts of the Bible that we tend to overlook and pass over, and I don't believe we ought to pass over any of it. Not all of us of the same value. Not all of us is as easy to digest or understand or apply, but it's all part of the Word of God. Now, when we come to Psalm 49, the psalmist is kind of meditating on the difference between the rich and the poor. And what impresses him is, and he says, "Hear this, all peoples, both low and high, rich and poor together." He says, "I got a message for all of you, whether you are rich, whether you're high and mighty, or whether you are poor, low and unmighty, I have got a message for you." And this is what he says in verse 5, "Why should I fear in times of trouble when the iniquity of those who cheat me surrounds me, those who trust in their wealth and boast of the abundance of their riches?" So he's writing from a standpoint. This is not written by David. This is one of the sons of Korah. And apparently he'd been in a situation where people with money and power had ripped him off. And he's writing about a situation like that and about the anxiety and anger maybe that we would fear. But here's what he says. You got to look down the road and see where this whole thing is headed. Truly, he says in verse 7, "No man can ransom another or give to God the price of his life. For the ransom of their life is costly and can never suffice, that he should live on forever and never see the pit." He goes on and says in verse 12, "Man in his pomp will not remain. He is like the beasts that perish." Back in verse 10, in verse 8, he says, "The ransom of their life is costly, can never suffice, that he should live on forever and never see the pit," as I read just moments ago. So in other words, what he says about the poor and the rich alike, they are going to die because there's no ransom that they can afford that would be enough to cause God to spare them from being sent to the pit, from being sent to Sheol. "Thus, this is the path," he says in verse 15 or 13, "of those who have foolish confidence. Their confidence is in themselves. Their confidence is in their wealth. Their confidence is in their health. Yet after them people approve of their boasts. Like sheep They are appointed for Sheol. Death shall be their shepherd in the afterlife, and the upright shall rule over them in the morning. Their very form shall be consumed in Sheol with no place to dwell. But catch this, but God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. In other words, it says there is a ransom. God has paid the ransom, and he will ransom, he will redeem, he will rescue my soul from the power of Sheol. Sheol in the Old Testament is the place where departed spirits go. And the writer says, look, when my life ends, I know that there is a ransom that's been paid, that God himself has provided, that will redeem my soul from the power of Sheol, the place where every other departed spirit goes. The spirits of the rich who've died without this ransom being applied to their lives will go to Sheol. The poor, the low, who have not availed themselves of the ransom that God has provided, they too will go to Sheol. And so he says in verse 16, be not afraid when a man becomes rich, when the glory of his house increases, for when he dies, he will carry away nothing. You know, they make burial suits. Maybe you've heard this before. They make burial suits for funerals, for people to be buried in. And you know what every one of these burial suits has in common? No pockets. Why? Because there's nothing you can take with you. You know, a friend of mine's pointed out, you never see a U-Haul trailer behind a hearse because you can't take it with you. So God requires a ransom because he is holy. But he himself provides the ransom because he is love. We can't provide the ransom. God has provided it because he is love. He requires it because he is just, because he is righteous. There is none that does good, no, not one. All men have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So we can't redeem ourselves. We can't save ourselves. We can't live a life that's good enough to pass muster. And the reality is, and the ransom that he has provided is the substitutionary sacrifice of Jesus Christ. So we are, and another point, we are not saved because we are sorry for our sins. We are saved because Christ died for our sins. And the only place of redemption, rescue, and eternal life is taking refuge in his provision. You know, back in about 1200, Richard I was the King of England. He was known as Richard the Lionheart. He was returning from a crusade to the Holy Land, and as he was coming through Europe, Leopold V captured him in Austria. The Holy Roman Empire, or Emperor, that's Leopold V, demanded a ransom for Richard's release. The price was to be 150,000 marks, equal to 3 tons of silver, an enormous ransom demand. But the people of England so loved their king, they submitted to extra taxation. Many nobles donated their fortunes for Richard's release. After many months, the money was raised and King Richard returned to England, and that's where we get the phrase, a king's ransom. Now here's the difference. In Richard's case, the poor people provided a ransom to rescue the rich. In our case, it's the King of Glory, wealthy beyond their wildest imagination, who provides the ransom for the beggarly poor. That's us. Now I want to urge you, if you've not availed yourself of the ransom of Christ, today may be the day to do it. Go before Christ, bow before him, ask him to search your heart and bring to your mind every sin that you need to confess before God. Confess every one that he brings to your mind, and then claim forgiveness in the blood of Christ. Well, let's go to prayer. Lord God, I pray that we will not fear when evil days come and we are surrounded by those who put their trust in wealth and boast of their riches. May we continue to believe that no man can redeem the life of another or give to you a ransom for him. May all of us see that the wise, the foolish, and the senseless alike perish and leave their wealth to others. Teach us that man, despite his riches, does not endure, and that a man who has riches without understanding dies just like the beasts of the field. Lord, we trust that through Christ you will redeem our lives from the grave, and we claim your promise that you will take us to yourself when we die.
You
Amen.
shall not murder. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. This is the 6th commandment of the 10 commandments. You shall not murder. We are asking schools all over America to put this on their marquees, put this on their signs out in front of their school for 1 week to remind America's students that innocent life is precious. Help us spread the word about this campaign to your friends and family. Please go to our website, afa.net, and sign our open letter to America's schools. We need to proclaim this message, you shall not murder, across the land. Why? Because gun control alone will not solve matters of the heart. We need our young people to understand that murder is a violation of God's law, and also it's a violation of the laws all across this land. So help us. Go to afa.net and spread the word.
Rescue the weak and needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Corner. According to former United Nations senior official Andrew McLeod, UN aid workers have raped over 60,000 people, and it employs 3,300 pedophiles. He explained that predatory sex abusers specifically target aid charity jobs to get close to vulnerable women and children, and the UN has gone to great lengths to cover it all up. These predators roam freely all over the world wearing UNICEF t-shirts. Will the Me Too movement stand up for these victims?
Listen to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Central on AFR. For more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to this brand new edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, and I am your congenial, convivial, amiable, and as Rob reminds me, effervescent host. Now, a couple of quick items. I just came across these stories this morning, kind of a tandem stories. The first one is that California, believe it or not, has the worst quality of life in the entire United States. And to me, ladies and gentlemen, this is an illustration of what governance and political leadership by liberals does. You know, when I was a kid, 1964, we moved to California. And I'm telling you, California in the mid-1960s, for a kid in Colorado, small town in Colorado, California was like Neverland. California was the closest place you could get in the United States to the promised land. It had a mythical quality about it. It was the home of Disneyland. And you know, we thought we were going to paradise. And back then, that was pretty close. California was an absolutely great place to live. Now it has the worst quality of life in the entire country. It's one step ahead of New Jersey. I remember somebody saying one time that New Jersey looks like the back of an old radio. So New Jersey is 49th. Indiana is 48th. And homelessness in California, this is just one marker. Homelessness in California has surged 75% in the last 6 years, according to the Los Angeles Times. There are 55,000 homeless people in Los Angeles County. That's more people that live in the city where the American Family Association is headquartered. We got about 40,000 people in Tupelo. That's more people than we have in our entire town, our entire city. And this is something that Donald Trump has been talking about part of the problem with having people with mental challenges shooting up our schools is a generation ago we had institutions that were established to care for the mentally ill. And if people were diagnosed as mentally unstable and a danger to themselves and to others, they could be put in one of these mental institutions after a court hearing, court order. You're not going to, because we have a constitutional right to liberty. That's in the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is a euphemism for property. We have constitutional God-given rights to life, liberty, and property. Liberty means you're free to come and go whenever you want and wherever you want. Well, mentally ill people put in an institution, they're deprived of their constitutional right to liberty. So you got to have due process. They got to go before a judge, and the judge has to be convinced that this person is a danger to himself, is a danger to others, and then he can basically become a resident of that mental institution. Well, again, so most of these 55,000 people, generation ago, would have had a place in a mental institution. Some of them run by the state, a lot of them run by private charities as a ministry and an extension of the work of the church, which is where it ought to be and where it ought to go back to if we ever do this again. But because of the liberals, again, they said, look, it's not fair for these many mentally ill people to be boxed up in a room. That's not fair. We got to set them loose. So virtually all of these mental institutions were just emptied, and these mentally ill people were dumped on the street. Now, they don't have the skills to be able to care for themselves, hold down a job, provide a place of accommodation for themselves, and so they become homeless. They become people who live on the street. So again, there's another liberal solution, supposedly in the interest of liberty and freedom, just consign these people to an absolutely beggarly and destitute existence. You know, a couple of other things about California that people don't know is California has the least educated workforce in the entire country. California has the least educated workforce in the entire country. I mean, they are miles beyond any other state in the country. Mississippi used to have the least educated workforce. We are 49th now. California is 50th, and California will be last for the rest of earthly history. You know why? Illegal immigration. You look at their population, you factor in the illegal immigrants that live there that are illiterate in every language on earth, including their own language. California right now and will forever have the least educated workforce in the United States. Then I got another story I came across that the Boise, my hometown, where my kids were born and raised, is the fastest growing city in the country. This was in Forbes, I think. Fastest growing city in the country is Boise, Idaho. There was a picture, made me homesick, man. Boise, Idaho, to me, and I understand why every time you do one of these greatest places to live and stuff, Boise is in the mix somewhere in the top 10. I believe it is the finest place in America to live. You've got everything you'd ever want in that location in terms of climate. You got a change of seasons. It's not too crowded, not too congested. You've got rivers, you've got skiing, you've got fishing, you've got hiking, everything you'd want. So I can understand why people want to move there to the city of Boise. You know, and we used to just grind our teeth every time one of these articles like this would come out, because we knew that meant more people from California, which has the worst quality of life in the United States, were going to be moving where? Well, they can read. They're going to move to Boise, Idaho. So we'd have all these Californians coming into Idaho. And so, you know, we used to just grieve every time we'd see one of these stories talking about what a great place to live Idaho is, because we knew that California people were going to come because the climate, the living climate, was so much different, so much better in Boise, in the state of Idaho. But what they did not realize is the very values in which they believed were the values that wrecked the state of California. There was a reason why they did not want to raise their children in the septic tank that California had become, and it was because of liberal values had permeated the political and cultural landscape. They wanted to get away from that, but they would bring with them that same set of values. They hadn't made the connection yet, so they'd come up and kind of pollute our politics, and we were never really excited about that. You know, there was one column. There was a columnist in the, I don't know why I'm talking about this. This is completely off topic. But there was a columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle. His name was Herb Cain, and he was a featured columnist and, you know, one of the most well-known columnists in the country. Anyway, he had a chortle. I mean, San Francisco, this is big time. It's glitzy. It's trendy. It's hip. All the cool kids live there. And he came across a story. You know, we'd have a newspaper, the Idaho Statesman, and they would do a survey every year. What's your favorite restaurant? What's your favorite Mexican restaurant? what's your favorite this, what's your favorite that. And one of them was, what is your favorite night spot? What is your favorite after-hours spot? You know what the people in Boise picked? Taco Bell.
Oh, man.
That was our favorite night spot. And Herb Cain, he just could not get enough of that. These yahoos, these redneck hillbillies in Idaho, their favorite place to go after 10 o'clock is Taco Bell. You know, and we just laughed at that. And what we said, man, I hope everybody in the United States of America reads that column. We want them to think that Boise is the last place on the face of the earth they would ever want to live or move to.
What you said earlier has got me wanting to go to Boise.
Oh, man, it's
Boy,
wow.
Mountains and skiing and hiking. And
everything that you'd want, like the camp, great camping.
Wow.
My daughter and I used to go for hikes in the Sawtooth Mountains, a wilderness area. You got to hike in and hike out, but you could get there. You know, it was reachable. It was accessible by car.
That's cool.
You know, we'd drive up in the morning, and we did it. One time we did a 17-mile hike in the Sawtooth National Recreation Area. You know, we got up at 5 and drove a couple hours to get there, and then we hiked for 17 miles up one drainage and across a 9,400-foot pass with snowfield up there in August. And then we came all the way back down the drainage and came back, and time to drive home and stop for dinner on the way. So you can do stuff like that, and it's spectacular. You know, the Sawtooth, I'm taking way too much time with this, but the Sawtooth Mountains, I mean, you ought to see them sometime because they are just absolutely spectacular. They're called the Sawtooth Mountains because the mountain range reminds you of the teeth of a saw.
Wow.
They are that jagged. And it is spectacular. So anyway, all that stuff is up there. You can backpack up there. You can hike up there. Got some of the best fishing in the world. Anyway, my apologies to all of my friends in Boise. I'm going to do a radio interview tomorrow with KIDO in Boise. Looking forward to reconnecting with my friends. But it just got me thinking about Boise. Anyway, Newsweek magazine, by the way, is about ready to get evicted. They're about ready to go under. And it reminded me that they did a feature piece on me back in 2011. And the title of their piece, you can still go there and read it, but you better do it in a hurry because it's probably going to disappear into the archives of history. The title of the piece was How Brian Fisher Became the Newest Media Darling, which I never knew that I was. They open this way. If you follow political news, you've almost certainly read or heard a quote from Brian Fisher in the past few months, even if you didn't realize it. You might recall a conservative activist complaining that the Congressional Medal of Honor was being feminized, or that President Obama wants Indian tribes to be our new overlords. That was Fisher, the media's new poster boy for right-wing extremism. They say, I first gained notoriety after the shooting at Fort Hood when he argued that Muslims should be banned from serving in the United States military. Further anti-Muslim statements established Fisher as a subject of ire for MSNBC's Rachel Maddow. Since then, Fisher has provided a steady stream of overwrought invective, which liberal-leaning outlets such as Talking Points Memo have gleefully recounted. Fisher's critics also benefit from the twofer of his being both entertaining and threatening. So apparently I'm fun to listen to, but I'll scare the daylights out of you. That's Newsweek 2011. Fisher's program Focal Point reaches about 2 million listeners, about 2.3 now, and has featured guest appearances from a number of prominent Republicans, such as Indiana Representative Mike Pence, South Carolina Senator Jim DeMint, Mike Huckabee, Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty, who on Wednesday told Fisher he would be in favor of reinstating Don't Ask, Don't Tell. But Fisher can provide a biblical rationale for stances that would seem wholly unconnected to religion. Now, if you read the Bible, you realize there is nothing that is disconnected from the worldview of the Scripture. He said this regarding the Medal of Honor. What you see in Scripture is that soldiers are honored for vanquishing the enemy in pursuit of a military objective. We have yet to do that in Iraq and Afghanistan. Not one Medal of Honor for killing the enemy in pursuit of a military objective. What we've done instead, and I don't begrudge these men. These men are heroes who give up their lives to rescue and save their comrades. But that's different than leading troops into the teeth of the enemy and overtaking an enemy position and capturing it for the good guys. That's what we used to give the Medal of Honor for. When we first started giving Medals of Honor in World War II, 80% of the Medals of Honor were for that kind of heroism. We got to the Vietnam War, we were down to 24% were for that kind of heroism. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
This is Dr. Richard Land, President of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. As I shared with you yesterday, teens are being exposed to ever more explicit and deviant pornography online, and it is leading to the undermining of our nation's morals. While the acceptance of pornography as moral, 1/3 of Americans say yes to porn, still lags behind the acceptance of the morality of sex outside marriage. 69% say that's morally acceptable. And the moral acceptance of gay-lesbian relationships, 63%. On the nation's moral scales, the acceptance of pornography is moving up fast. If pornography ever reaches these levels of moral acceptance in American society, then all the other non-traditional behaviors will increase to much higher levels. Hardcore pornography's ability to redefine moral deviance down to an ever lower new normal is truly as dangerous as it is impressive. Americans who want to see moral reformation or reformation in their culture should do all they can to confront and minimize pornography's impact on the nation's citizens, especially its young people. Pornography is the propaganda for a paganized sexual morality that will submerge our culture in a tidal wave of sexual deviance if uncontested and uncontrolled. Every church, temple, mosque, and synagogue in America should consciously seek to be part of a pornography-free counterculture that attempts to inoculate its membership in age-applicable ways against pornography's seductive blandishments. In so doing, these religious Americans of all persuasions can help ensure that 36% morally acceptable rate on pornography goes down precipitously rather than up in the future. The fate of our children and the fate of our country are at stake. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher
on American Family Radio.
Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
afa.net.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. One last paragraph out of that Newsweek profile. Well, if I can find my story. What did I do with my story now? Here it is. Here it is. And we had a lot of fun with this. This is likewise when Fisher declared in response to the death of a hiker attacked by a grizzly bear, quote, "If it's a choice between grizzlies and humans, the grizzlies have to go."
Yeah.
He was, in his view, expressing God's will, quote, "If you go back to the civil code of ancient Israel, what you see enunciated there is a clear principle that a land is operating under the blessing of God, a land that is operating under the blessing of God does not have to fear from savage beasts." And I added, only humans are made in the image of God. Animals are not. All right, so that's Newsweek's profile, 2011. That is going to go into the archives of history in short order. I'm ready to padlock the doors and kick everybody out. You know, I wrote that, I talked on this program about the Bible indicating that humans and dinosaurs lived at the same time. Remember, God, I think the behemoth in Job 40 was a sauropod, a big giant dinosaur with a huge tail, swings a tail like a cedar. Elephants don't have a tail like that. Hippos don't have a tail like that. You know, and God says to Job, behold, go out and look at him. You can walk out your front door and you can look at one of those guys, and I made that. So anyway, it wasn't long before a liberal blog called Patheos picked up on that. They made a career out of going after me. This is their comment. Right-wing commentator Brian Fisher claimed that dinosaurs and humans lived on the earth at the same time. He's right, give or take 65 million years. Naturally, he cited the Bible, not science, in his defense. Fisher is confusing reality with an episode of the Flintstones. But this is standard creationist approach to the world. Take a random Bible verse, assume it's true, then cram all of human knowledge into those words, no matter how much you have to stretch your interpretations to make it work. It's dishonest, but what else would you expect when dishonesty is creationist currency? You know, I got an interesting story in here. I got to get to some Florida stuff here before long, and I don't know if I've got this story handy, and I don't really need the story. Oh, yeah, here it is. I don't really need the story in front of me to talk about it. But, you know, one of the things, and this is about science and the creationist point of view, one of the things that we as young earth, I believe in a young earth, because that's what the Bible teaches. You take the Bible at face value, and it teaches that the earth is probably somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 years old, that man is 6,000 years old. The executive producer wanted to know, is Focal Point still a news show? Apparently, Newsweek said this was a news show. Is it still a news show?
Yeah.
I don't know if she thinks I'm trying to turn it into a travelogue show or what.
Since you're a media darling.
A media darling,
you know, I mean, you can go wherever you need
entertainment,
to. Yeah.
Entertainment today. Anyway, you know what they always accuse us of, as those who believe in a young earth, which I believe is what the Bible teaches if you take it at face value. You know, and I believe that the rule of Bible interpretation is you interpret any text according to the author's intended meaning. In other words, our job when we look at something that's in the Scripture is to try to understand the meaning that the author intended to give to his words. You know, one of the questions you have to decide, is he using this expression figuratively or is he using it literally? That's one of the questions you have to ask. So if somebody, you know, when Jesus says, I am the door, we don't assume that he's talking about a literal door that he's made out of wood and has a doorknob on his chest. We know that he's using that as a figure of speech. That's interpreting it according to the meaning that the author intends. But one of the things they criticize us for is the fact that we believe the earth is 10,000 years old, but we can see stars that are billions of light years away. Ha, 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 those stupid, silly creationists. How do you account for that? You think the earth is 10,000 years old, and yet we can see stars that are billions of light years away. Well, you know what? It turns out that evolutionists, get ready for this, have exactly the same problem. This is a piece from Forbes.com. This is a Tony kind of intellectual highbrow magazine. And what evolutionists believe is that the earth is 13.8 billion years old precisely. They've settled on that figure for some reason. That's how old the earth is, 13.8, or the universe is 13.8 billion years. Not the earth, but the universe, 13.8 billions of years old. The problem is that we can see today 46 billion light years away. You see the problem? They say the universe, that includes all the stars, all the sources of light in the universe, is 13.8 billion years old. Then how in the world, Forbes says, can we see light that's coming from 46 billion light years away? And they go through a very convoluted explanation how you can get from 13.8 billion to 46 billion. And in my mind, if you could make this explanation work, there's no reason why you couldn't start at 10,000 and use the same method, the same formula to get from 10,000 years old to billions of light years away. So I just want to make that point that evolutionists have exactly the same point, the same problem that they accuse us of having with the billions and billions of light years. You know, and my suggestion for this, it's not a perfect explanation, but my theory for this is that when God created the universe, he created all the sources of light, all the stars, we're told in Genesis 1. He created them, and he put them in place in the first week of creation. And the implication is those distant stars were visible from the moment he hung them in space. What does that mean? It's like God created these stars, these sources of light, with the light rays already in place, connected to the earth. As the creator of everything, he had the capacity to do that. I mean, what would be the point of putting a star out there, a light-giving star out there in space, when the people he'd created to enjoy it weren't going to be able to see that light for 8 billion light years? What would be the point of even making it? So he created it with the light beams already in place, already connected to the earth, so man could see it. Now, if God can, and realize there's nothing that God can create that does not have the appearance of age. He can't create. It's impossible to create something without it having the appearance of age. So when he created wine, for instance, at the wedding in Cana, if you brought an enologist in there, sample this, tell me what you think, he could tell you how old that wine was. He could tell you the kind of grape that it came from. He could tell you the location of the vineyard in which those grapes probably grew. He could tell you how long that wine had aged in the bottle because it was fine wine. It was premium wine. But Christ had just created it seconds ago. But it had the appearance of age. When he created Adam, Adam would have looked like a full-grown man. You bring some physiologist in there to examine him, he'd say, this guy's 30 years old and all this kind of stuff. He wasn't. He was seconds old. So you can't create without the appearance of age, and that would also include the universe. Now I'm going to take the whole segment, it looks like, the whole first hour on this topic. So think of something creative to talk about when we go to the phones here in a minute. Here is a piece of really, really good news. You are going to love this, I promise you. This is a piece of great news. If you've ever been to the U.S. Capitol, they have a main room under the rotunda there in the Capitol building that has a whole bunch of statues in it. There's 108 statues in it, and 100 of those statues are provided by the states. They each get to have 2 statues, and they can pick whoever they want, some significant figure in their history as a state, and they can memorialize them in the form of a statue that is placed in the U.S. Capitol. Now, in order for somebody to get a statue, they got to be dead first. Now, here's what's going to happen. As you're aware, Billy Graham's funeral is going to be held tomorrow in North Carolina, but the legislature in North Carolina in 2015, they passed legislation that calls for a statue of Billy Graham to be placed in the U.S. Capitol. And so that's going to happen. The next step is they need to present the request to the architect of the Capitol. That's going to be a formality. And they're going to replace the current Capitol, or the current statues there to represent Charles Aycock, who was a former North Carolina governor. This is all according to the Raleigh News and Observer. So there's going to be a permanent recognition of Billy Graham in the U.S. Capitol. I think the state of Washington has a memorial, has a statue in honor of Marcus Whitman, who was a missionary, one of the first missionaries to the Indian nations in that part of the United States. Now, one of the reasons they're willing to replace the statue of, well, the other statue, one of the reasons they're willing to replace the statue of Aycock, let me gather my thoughts here. He was a Democratic governor in North Carolina from 1901 to 1905. He was a segregationist and a white supremacist. So North Carolina is at a point where they're ready to put all of that behind them. We once honored a segregationist and a white supremacist. Now we're going to honor the guy that in his crusade in Mississippi in 1952, he came into the auditorium. I told you the story before. He came into an auditorium, had seats on one side of the auditorium for blacks and seats on the other side of the auditorium for whites. Billy Graham talked to the ushers and said, you got to take those rope lines down. I'm not going to have segregation at one of my rallies. They said, no, Reverend Graham, we can't do it. So Billy Graham himself went through that entire auditorium, and he took down those rope lines that separated the children of God by race. So that's the guy now that's going to be representing North Carolina in the Capitol. Now, there's a second guy up there that's represented. His name is Zebulon B. Vance. Now, he was a Confederate officer, as well as a two-time governor and U.S. senator. And I'm going to make a prediction here, because remember this rush we've had to get rid of Confederate statues around the country. Well, here's a Confederate statue. This guy was a Confederate officer. And I'm going to predict that the day is soon coming when there's going to be a concerted effort made to get rid of every statue in the United States Capitol that features an individual who has any connection, no matter how remote, with the Confederacy. So once again, when they get on this rampage, you start losing a part of your history. Anyway, that's a prediction of mine. My guess is they probably haven't even thought of it. I'm just hoping I didn't give the wrong people an idea here. All right, well, that's it. We're going to come back with your phone calls, talk about whatever you want today, because I've been focused on a narrow set of topics. 888-589-8840.
This is Steve Conover inviting you to listen to the Friends of Israel Today each week on this station. Here's our host and Bible teacher, Chris Katulka.
Hey everybody, the Friends of Israel Today is a unique radio show that teaches biblical truth for changing times. We do this through Q&A, timely interviews, dramatic readings from the life of Holocaust survivor Zvi Kalisher, and of course, Bible teaching.
To learn more, visit foiradio.org.
Join us for Friends of Israel Today, Sunday morning at 11:30 Central on American Family Radio.
You wish you could stop thinking about it, but you can't. It never quite leaves your thoughts. Even in the joyful moments, it's there. The sadness, shame, and sorrow. You know you can't go on like this, so don't. Phone the International Helpline for Abortion Recovery at 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who's already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
Attention all Christians who would like to become more effective in presenting and defending their beliefs. This is Alex McFarland, and I urge you to attend the 2018 edition of Truth for a New Generation, the conference on apologetics, worldview, and evidence for the Christian faith. TNG is coming to Greensboro, North Carolina, March 23 and 24. Hear an amazing lineup, including Josh McDowell, apologist J. Warner Wallace, Todd Starnes from Fox News, and much, much more.
This is Abraham Hamilton III of the American Family Association. We're in a battle for the future of our nation, and I want to see you at Truth for a New Generation as we pray and get equipped to defend the faith, asking God to save our nation.
Don't miss Truth for a New Generation, March 23 and 24, Greensboro, North Carolina. You may register at truthforanewgeneration.com.
Presented in part by the American Family Association.
American Family Radio.
You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher.
Hi, welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Give you a lot of latitude in the phone calls in this segment since I've stayed on a fairly narrow set of topics, but glad to have you talk about anything that we've talked about today. That'd be the preference, obviously, but if you got something on your mind that's been in the news this past week and you want to talk about that, that will be fine. Also, another piece of good news on the winnable war front, the Florida House of Representatives has approved a bill to post the phrase "In God We Trust" in all public schools. Now, there's no way, there should be no way that the courts can stop this. Do you know why? Because "In God We Trust" is our official national motto established by Congress. This is a law. The law says, "In God We Trust." That is our national motto. It's on our currency. It's on our coins. So there ought to be absolutely no way that any judge who has any attention to the law, remember his job is to uphold the law, you got any judge who keeps his oath to uphold the Constitution and the law would find this perfectly constitutional. We'll see how it goes. All right, let's go to Larry in Waynesboro, Tennessee. Larry, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hi, Brian. Enjoy your show every day and try to get through. But listen, on the age of the earth,
yes, sir.
We're young earthers, and really, if you put all the baguettes together, some people have already done it. But I ran across something lately that seems to make a lot of sense. On the Hebraic calendar, we are in the year 5778. You can take everything, like back to the flood, that would be like 4,400 years ago or so. You can work on back into BC, but about 5778 from the beginning of time. And you were talking about the dinosaurs. There are carvings and drawings on cave and rock showing a person riding a dinosaur. And in the Bible, it would probably have dragons instead of dinosaurs. And, it's just so odd. They think they come up with something. In Genesis, there was cloning.
Yeah, explain that.
From Adam's rib. Eve came from Adam's rib.
She came right out of Adam's body, didn't she? Yeah.
And the two of them had all the genes and all the makeup for the 36 shades of brown.
Yep, all the pigmentation, all the capacities for all the different shades of skin were inherent. They were present in Adam and Eve, which means their skin color was probably sort of a Mediterranean, probably sort of a light brown color.
We are basically 36 shades of brown.
Yeah.
There is no black and white, and the lightest colored people on the face of the earth, the albino, which can be any shape or form, they're in Tanzania, Africa. And I want to tell you what, I have dealt with all types of people over the years in my business, and I kid some of them. I have done business with white African Americans and black rednecks. We are all God's children. God bless you, Brian.
All right. Thank you, sir. That's a great call. And the reality is there's only, my basic answer to the whole issue of racism is there's only one race. There's only one race. It's the human race. There's only one race. So we are all, and you get 1/8 of an inch below the skin and we're all the same color. 1/8 of an inch. We're all the same color. So we just need to just dump this idea of dividing people, evaluating people, measuring people by their skin color. We ought to just get rid of those categories all together. All right, let's go to Nikki in Olive Branch. Number to call is 888-589-8840. Nikki in Olive Branch, what's on your mind?
How are you doing today, Brian?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm all right. I was just going to tell you were talking about Idaho, and I used to drive a truck over the road.
Yeah.
I've been to all over 48, and I'll tell you right now, I think my favorite piece of roadway is in Idaho on U.S. Highway 12 that runs along the Clearwater River.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Are you familiar with it?
Oh, man, I love that stretch. And that's, by the way, the route that Lewis and Clark took. That follows the Lewis and Clark route. They were hiking up on the top, on the crest of the Bitterroot Mountains there on what's called the Lolo Trail. And one of my bucket list goals, Nikki, is to hike that trail, or just part of it. I just want to hike a mile of it or 2 miles. That's all I want to do. Get up on top of that ridge. You got to use some kind of a four-wheel vehicle to get up there. But I just want to hike about 2 miles of exactly the same path that Lewis and Clark walked, because it looks the same today. They haven't developed it. They haven't turned it into a logging road.
Right.
You could walk on exactly the same piece of earth that Lewis and Clark did. So I got to get up there someday. But I hear what you're saying. That's a spectacularly beautiful
that's a good bucket
route.
list. But it's beautiful. Have a blessed day. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Nikki. Appreciate that very, very much. So somebody's got a heart for Idaho is always going to be welcome on this program. All right. Let's go to Robert in Arkansas. Robert, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir. On the statues, it seems like, they tout racism and slavery, but what they cut down on them are the people that fought to end it, and maybe they're trying to cut out that we've always stood together, for generations now.
Yeah. Well, and we need to honor people that ought to be honored. And, one phrase flashed into my mind from C.S. Lewis talking about slavery. He says he's against slavery, not because he sees no one who is fit to be a slave. He says, I see no one who is fit to be a master. All right. Thank you for the call, Robert. I appreciate that. Let's grab a call from Jim, Southern Shores, North Carolina. Jim, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian. How you doing today?
Good.
Good, sir. Enjoy your show. You were talking about New Earth theories, and we look at carbon-14 testing and all, so much science that's at times irrational, and we've ignored things like solar dust that settles at an absolute, given amount of depth in vacuum. Mm-hmm. Moon created at the same time of the Earth, and when we sent the Apollo, moon missions up there, the original landers had spikes in them that were 3 feet long because they expected 200 million year old, dust to be 3 or 4 feet thick. And invariably it was only about 6,000 years worth. So I love the fact that you stick to the guns and all
right, Jim. Well, and Jim is exactly right. That's a powerful confirmation or affirmation of a young Earth, because you can measure the rate at which solar dust falls from the universe and is collected on a body like the moon. And again, Jim is right. When they were planning the lunar missions, they were at first afraid that if they landed on the moon, they would sink into 54 feet of moon dust. It's very light, kind of very sifty, and so they were real concerned. That was a genuine problem they had to try to solve. And again, you look at the lunar lander, the picture of the guys walking on the moon. I mean, there was just a tiny little bit of moon dust on the surface of the moon, about the amount of dust that would accumulate in about 10,000 years. Okay, Jim, appreciate the call. That's great. Let us go to Diane, Tampa, Florida. What's on your mind, Diane?
Thank you for taking my call, Brian.
Yes.
And my call is about the division they're creating between the Democrats and the Republicans. We need to keep in love, and the Internet, to me, is more of a trouble than guns, because they can actually use the Internet to stop your cars, to wreck the ships, to take off cruise satellites, and they're keeping us on these small subjects like the guns, where people with guns can use bombs, and they've caused a lot more damage than guns have, and I think they're trying to keep us off guard on what we need to be thinking about. The Internet is morally devaluing our whole culture. They have cartoons that sit there and show sex acts between adults and children on cartoons, and I just think the Internet is our bigger enemy, not guns.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you, Diane. And you're right. You read stories every week about hackers taking control of vehicles, taking control of airplanes. Now, so far, they haven't done anything coordinated, haven't done anything systematic. But Diane is right. That capability is being demonstrated every day. And, of course, we're just going to see more of that effort of hackers to take control of things that move and fly. All right, let's go to Mark in New Orleans, Louisiana. Mark, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Oh, hey, Brian.
Hey.
I wanted to come up with a new designation for me and you. We're both the same. We're both radical conservatives. And I believe we're related because we both think alike, and it's kind of scary when I listen to you. But I wanted to talk about dinosaurs. Back when I was a young father and had children in school, I wanted to learn about evolution and creation so that I would have some ammunition to prove my point. And I listened to a tape on Ron Carlson had a tape, and he talked about a dinosaur. You can fact check me for this. I don't think this is fake news, but a dinosaur is a Greek word for terrible lizard.
That's correct.
And a lizard is a reptile. A reptile is the only species that as long as it lives, it continues to grow. That's why
correct.
You have 20-foot crocodiles, 30-foot boa constrictors, pythons. So if God created the reptiles on the sixth day and they grew until the flood, that's a pretty big lizard.
Yeah, you bet. Well, I appreciate the call, Mark, and I've talked about that before on this program, and the left picked up on it, and they just howled, because I was basically saying the dinosaurs are just thousands of years old lizards, reptiles that grew and grew and grew. Just like man could live for 900 years, reptiles never stop growing. If they live as long as man does, they could get pretty big. All right, Mark, thanks for the call. I appreciate you, and I like the fact that you think like I do. That must mean you're a pretty smart fella. Just kidding. All right, we'll be right back. Focal Point, American Family Radio.
Faith, family,
freedom. American Family Radio.
There's a lot happening around us. That's why Christians need to stand strong on family values and morality. Hi, I'm Ray Rooney, editor of The Stand, a blog from the American Family Association. The Stand has timely, carefully written articles on relevant cultural issues that you can quickly forward to others. Visit afa.net/The Stand.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. The president again called on Congress to create a comprehensive bill aimed at gun violence and seeking bipartisan support for background check safeguards as he prepares for another meeting with families of school shooting victims. John Roberts reports.
The president will voice his support for the Stop School Violence Act and the Cornyn-Murphy background checks bill. He's not going to ask for specific legislation. He'll just ask the group that was at the White House yesterday to come up with measures. He will also support raising the minimum age to purchase a long gun, that includes rifles and shotguns, to 21. He's going to expand a DHS test program to stop school violence. He wants to take that national. He wants to fix the FBI tipster program, encourage states to adopt what are called extreme risk protection orders so that weapons could be taken away from people who threaten to harm themselves or others. And he will encourage arming school faculty and staff. Not quite sure how they're going to do this yet, but it could be through federal grants or federal training.
Despite being told to go back to their classrooms, teachers across West Virginia are once again gathered outside the state's capital, calling for their demands to be met.
Teachers in West Virginia are back at the state capitol today protesting low pay and health care costs.
They can go somewhere else and make $5,000 to $10,000 more a year.
It's about our students and staying here. We have to make sure that we have something to offer them.
They're trying to pressure the state Senate to push through a 5% pay raise negotiated by Governor Jim Justice and okayed by the House overnight to end a teacher walkout in West Virginia's 55 counties where schools are closed again today. Lawmakers are also considering where that money is going to come from. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
A constitutional attorney says Attorney General Jeff Sessions is using the proper protocol in calling for the Inspector General to investigate corruption with the Obama Justice Department. Chad Groening has more.
Sessions has announced the Justice Department's Inspector General would investigate potential abuses of the Foreign Intelligence Act, or FISA. Sessions' announcement follow allegations from President Trump last year that Obama administration officials misused their FISA authority to wrongly surveil members of his transition team. But the president lambasted Sessions, tweeting, "Why is AG Jeff Sessions asking the Inspector General to investigate potentially massive FISA abuse? Will take forever, has no prosecutorial power, and already late with reports on Comey, etc. Isn't the IG an Obama guy? Why not use Justice Department lawyers? Disgraceful." Sessions responded saying, "As long as I am the Attorney General, I will continue to discharge my duties with integrity and honor, and this department will continue to do its work in a fair and impartial manner according to the law and Constitution." Matt Barber is co-founder and chief counsel of Christian Civil Rights Watch. First of all, he can understand Trump's frustration with what appears to be a laissez-faire approach at the DOJ.
Haven't seen a whole lot of initiative, and people are kind of hungry for that bulldog that's going to find the truths of the depth and level of corruption that was inherent within the Obama Department of Justice. So I can understand President Trump's frustration.
But having said that, Barber says using the IG is proper protocol.
The Inspector General's office is tasked, in fact, with investigating internal corruption, malfeasance, illegality within all branches of government, particularly within the Department of Justice.
I'm Chad Groening.
White House Communication Director Hope Hicks resigned on Wednesday after working with President Trump since day one. Counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, appeared on Fox and Friends today to talk about Hicks' departure.
To be effective at that job, and she's been enormously effective at that job, you have to really understand the underlying policies here. She shepherded a lot of resources and surrogates, and indeed the president's voice himself, when it came to passing major initiatives like tax reform, working on infrastructure now, holding forth at some of these roundtables yesterday on school safety. Yet last week's listening session with those affected by school shootings was Hope's original idea. And that's one example of many I can give you on how she very quietly but very assiduously has worked behind the scenes to make a real impact for the presidency and really for her country.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day, but it can also wake you up to the idea of supporting the American Family Association through a product you'd normally buy anyway. And you know, there's almost nothing as wholesome and basic to American culture as a good cup of coffee. Choose from morning blend, evening blend, and everything in between. Get your American Family Coffee and support the American Family Association at afastore.net.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. Here is some more good news. To start your second hour, U.S. crude production hit a record high in November. Manufacturing in the United States is expanding at the fastest pace since May of 2004, and real disposable incomes in the United States have increased the most since 2015. Now, Donald Trump is out there getting ready to impose tariffs on aluminum and steel. I'll just tell you, I'm not an economist, but I'm not a big fan of tariffs. I think tariffs start trade wars, which are not good for the consumer, not good for the producer. Remember, tariffs raise the cost of anything you put a tariff on. It raises the cost of that product to us as American consumers. Now, I have no problem with a fairly small tariff. That's how we funded our government. Until the 16th Amendment came along, our entire federal government was funded through tariffs. These were maybe 3%, 4% tariffs that were paid by any foreign producer who wanted to sell his product in the United States. We said, fine, you want access to our market? Here's what it's going to cost you. The entry fee is 3% or 4% of what you want to bring into this country. And we funded our entire federal government off of that. So it was a beautiful system because our entire federal government, notice, was funded by foreigners who wanted to access to American markets. It was beautiful in its simplicity. But they decided that wasn't enough money for the federal government. That's where the 16th Amendment came. And you can forget about it after that. Everything just went absolutely crazy after that. All right, let's see where we go. Let's grab clip number R1. It'll give me time to look for the story that I have on this topic. This is Don Lemon last night on CNN. Brian Fisher is my name, by the way. Program is Focal Point. We're in the second hour. Glad to have you on board. So Don Lemon on CNN last night, I had a bone to pick with Fox, and here's what it is.
So I was sitting in my office and I was watching all of the news channels, right? Trump TV or state-run TV, they're not even reporting this. So the Trump supporters, they don't even know about these stories. It doesn't even register. That's the amazing thing. We cover all of these things every day. The White House imploding behind him, and he's standing there going, nothing to see here, but his supporters probably don't even realize the extent of it.
So Don Lemon says, you watch Fox News, you're going to be ignorant. You won't even know that there is this tension in the White House. You won't even know who Hope Hicks is. You won't know that things got to such a point where she had to leave. She had to resign and leave the White House altogether. You wouldn't know that because Fox is so biased. They're so one-sided, they're not even going to give you a peek at any of the problems that Donald Trump might be having in his presidency. Here's what actually happened. Hope Hicks had been a close aide of President Trump's for 3 years. She was at his side during the campaign. She was the director of their communications department, never did interviews. She was a behind-the-scenes person. Now, she's comfortable in front of a camera. She was a model before she went to work for Donald Trump. I've seen a picture of her. She's a very attractive woman. But she didn't do interviews. She was behind the scenes controlling the communications and the message that was sent out from the White House. And so she's been at Donald Trump's side for 3 years. And for whatever reason, I mean, you hear different stories. I mean, I've read a number of stories about that over the last day or so, and you get a different read from everybody you talk to. You know, she gave testimony before the House Intel Committee, and people think, you know, Republicans, conservatives think she was trapped. She was asked if she ever told white lies for the president, like he's not available. And she said, yeah, sometimes I've said something like that, the president's not available, when technically he was. That's what she called a white lie. And they have been drilling her for that. She admitted that she lied. Hope Hicks has admitted that she's a liar. And apparently, according to some sources, Donald Trump was furious. I said, what were you thinking? Was very angry with her for that. And maybe she'd put up with enough and left. Or maybe she just decided it's time for me to move on. The cumulative toll of working in that kind of a high-pressure environment might have caught up with her. But here's what actually happened on Fox News about the Hope Hicks story. Fox News White House correspondent John Roberts actually broke the news on the 4 p.m. Eastern Time hour of Your World with Neil Cavuto. So Neil Cavuto and his show actually broke this story. The program that comes after Neil Cavuto is The Five. They led the 5 p.m. hour with a breaking news banner of her resignation and brought the reporter John Roberts on to discuss it. Roberts and Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge reported on the Hicks resignation in the 6 p.m. hour of the special report. David Bossie discussed the story with the story host Martha McCallum during the 7 p.m. hour. They talked about Hope Hicks. Tucker Carlson talked about Hope Hicks and her resignation in the 8 p.m. hour on the Fox News Channel. And Anthony Scaramucci talked with Sean Hannity at the 9 p.m. hour about Hope Hicks. So hardly a blackout on the Hope Hicks information. So again, it just shows you, I mean, this is an outright lie. Either Don Lemon was completely misinformed, uninformed, uneducated, or his staff misled him, or he was just telling a bald-faced lie, because Fox News broke the story, and they talked about it every single hour on every program for the rest of the day. Let's go back to Billy Graham just for a second. Clip number 1. I went back and caught this from the ceremony in the Capitol building yesterday, where Billy Graham was laid to rest, not laid to rest, but was laid in honor in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol. Only the fourth civilian ever to be honored by being placed in honor in the Capitol. And here's what Donald Trump said when he spoke about the little ceremony honoring Billy Graham.
In the spring of 1934, Billy Graham's father allowed a group of Charlotte businessmen to use a portion of the family's dairy farm to gather for a day of prayer. On that day, the men prayed for the city. They prayed that out of Charlotte, the Lord would raise up someone to preach the gospel to the ends of the earth. We are here today, more than 80 years later, because that prayer was truly answered.
All right, that's pretty cool.
Billy Graham was 15 years old at the time. Just a few months later, he accepted Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior. That choice didn't just change Billy's life, it changed our lives. It changed our country, and it changed, in fact, the entire world.
All right, that's the president talking about the conversion of Billy Graham to Jesus Christ. Talk about his ministry being the result of answered prayer, and how his ministry not only changed the United States of America, but had a life-changing impact on the entire world. Good for President Trump. Now, when we come back, we're going to turn our attention to gun control. Donald Trump sending some very, very uncertain signals yesterday. Give you a sneak preview. in this roundtable discussion in the White House, he endorsed the assault weapons ban. He endorsed background checks for private sales at gun shows. He endorsed raising the age to purchase firearms to 21. He declared that the top priority of the NRA since his election, that is concealed carry reciprocity, meaning you got a concealed carry weapon permit in one state, it's got to be honored in other states, just like your driver's license does. And he contended that members of Congress were petrified of the NRA, and that he was not. We'll talk about all this when we come back. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Stay with us. We will be right back.
You shall not murder. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. This is the 6th commandment of the 10 commandments. You shall not murder. We are asking schools all over America to put this on their marquees, put this on their signs out in front of their school for 1 week to remind America's students that innocent life is precious. Help us spread the word about this campaign to your friends and family. Please go to our website, afa.net, and sign our open letter to America's schools. We need to proclaim this message, you shall not murder, across the land. Why? Because gun control alone will not solve matters of the heart. We need our young people to understand that murder is a violation of God's law, and also it's a violation of the laws all across this land. So help us. Go to afa.net and spread the word.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
Anthem, one of the nation's largest health plans, has new clinical guidelines that do not require an anesthesiologist to monitor anesthesia during cataract surgery. The guidelines only provide general anesthesia for children and certain difficult patients or situations. For everyone else, the surgery will be done with the patient sedated but not asleep. For patients who want anesthesia, they'll have to pay for it themselves. Health plans are the corporate version of socialized medicine. Obamacare empowered them and eliminated their competitors, the real insurance companies. Ask Congress and state legislators to restore real insurance, which doesn't interfere with treatment decisions and doesn't keep you awake for surgery.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. We still have seats available for our September tours, Washington, D.C. and Williamsburg. Washington, D.C. and Mount Vernon, that's one tour. And then Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown, that is a separate tour. Now, we put them back to back so you can do both. If you're flying in from Texas or Montana or California or wherever you may be coming from, so that you can do those tours back to back with us if that's something you so choose to do. Now, Stephen McDowell of the Providence Foundation will be with us all along the way as our historian. Stephen will add context, he'll answer questions, talk about the people, the places, the events that make up our early American history. So for more information on this Spiritual Heritage Tour, go to the website spiritualheritagetours.com. spiritualheritagetours.com for the September tour information.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, welcome back to Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Program is Focal Point. Good to have you along and in the conversation. You might have heard a couple of weeks ago that KFC ran out of chicken in the UK. Now, they had chicken, but they switched transportation companies from a company that specialized in catering to restaurants to DHL. They don't deliver food, they deliver packages. And things got all gummed up. And of their 900 restaurants in the UK, 800 of them weren't getting chicken in time to fry it up and serve it. So they had to close them all. Now, we find out in New York, there is a gravy shortage. And again, it's the same problem. The delivery system using DHL. Man, I'm telling you, if DHL wants to get themselves out of the food delivery business, they're doing everything they need to do to bring that to pass. You remember Cheryl Atkinson? She's a reporter for CBS. We've talked about her a lot. Great journalist, great investigative reporter. Her computer was hacked back in 2012. She was fired by CBS for good reporting on the Benghazi scandal. And now it turns out that while her computer was in the custody of the Justice Department's Inspector General, they switched out her hard drive, took it out of her computer, and replaced it. It was secretly switched out by the Justice Department. Some more skullduggery in the Obama administration. All right, let's turn our attention to what's going on in Florida and some of the things that Donald Trump said yesterday about guns. And we've got a soundbite from Donald Trump. We'll start off with this. And, this is a concerning soundbite. If you believe in guns and gun rights, this is a concerning soundbite. Clip number 5, this is Donald Trump.
Or might take the firearms first and then go to court, because that's another system. Because a lot of times by the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures. I like taking the guns early, like in this crazy man's case that just took place in Florida. He had a lot of firearms. They saw everything. To go to court would have taken a long time. So you could do exactly what you're saying, but take the guns first, go through due process second.
Now the problem here, that there's no way. I want to pull you down off the ledge. Some of you might have heard the things that Donald Trump supports, and it's for somebody that supports gun rights, it's a list of horribles. The things that he supports, ban on assault weapons and all that kind of stuff. But I want to talk you down off the ledge by reminding you, number one, and I say this in the kindest way possible. I do not mean this as a knock on President Trump. It's just an observation. He is functionally illiterate in the Constitution. I've read more than one account about the guy that they brought in. They knew that Donald Trump was not well educated, was not deeply familiar with the provisions in the Constitution, so they brought a guy to come in and to walk him through the Constitution, get him familiar with every part of the Constitution. And the guy said, I finally gave up because when we got to the Fourth Amendment, Donald Trump, his eyes rolled in the back of his head, and his eyes glazed over. I mean, that was all that he could handle. So we never got past the Fourth Amendment. Well, it's the Fifth Amendment that talks all about due process, that you cannot have any one of your constitutional rights taken away except through due process. Well, right to keep and bear arms, that's a constitutional right. You cannot, in America, constitutionally, have that right taken from you other than through due process. Now, if due process is followed, yeah, you can have your right to keep and bear arms. Felons all across the country have learned this by now. If you commit a felony, you give up the right in most states ever to own a firearm again. So you've gone through due process. A court has found you guilty of a felony, so you've got your due process. You've faced your accusers. You've had a trial by jury and all that kind of stuff. But what Donald Trump is talking about here is taking guns out of the hands of people who have not had due process yet, and that's something that we really, and Donald Trump, I'm afraid, just does not understand. I mean, he's approaching this thing as a businessman would. He's a businessman. What's the problem? The problem is lunatic people have guns. Well, let's get those guns away from them. Let's just go in and do it. Let's just get her done. I mean, that's his mentality as a businessman. You got a challenge. Let's go. Let's go get it done. He doesn't realize that there are some constitutional safeguards there that also have to be honored. Even in putting people in these mental institutions, as we used to do, I don't know if this is true in every jurisdiction, but even in a case like that, nobody should be put in one of those institutions apart from due process. They ought to have an appearance before a judge or before a court, and then the prosecution or whoever ought to demonstrate to the court's satisfaction that this person has mental problems that are so severe that they're a danger to themselves and a danger to others. They need to be institutionalized for their own good. Now, that ought to be a pretty steep hill to climb, but you shouldn't have anybody in a mental institution that hasn't had a due process, none of this one flew over the cuckoo's nest kind of stuff. And here's the thing I want to assure you about. NRA is going to be all over this stuff. And there are Republicans in the House of Representatives. This stuff is never going to get anywhere. So I don't want you to fret. I think it's important that we're aware of this, that Donald Trump is kind of out of step and out of phase with the Constitution here. But this stuff, ladies and gentlemen, trust me, bring it down off the ledge. It's not going anywhere. There are enough conservative Republicans in the House of Representatives and enough in the Senate, and guns. I mean, that's an issue. You cannot, in 2018, in an election year, you cannot be running for election in the House, and everybody in the House is up for re-election, every single person, and you got a third of the Senate's up for. You can't be on the wrong side of the gun issue and get reelected in America. So there's no way this stuff is going to go through. Now, here's another problem that Donald Trump is advocating. This is according to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, clip number 6.
The president still supports raising the age limit to 21 for the purchase of certain firearms. We're meeting with bipartisan members of Congress tomorrow. We expect that to be a topic of discussion. He knows that everybody doesn't necessarily agree. We're not going to get into the details on the specifics of what we will propose, but we expect that to be part of the conversation tomorrow.
All right, so Donald Trump still out there supporting raising the age limit to 21. And there's two things that militate against this in my mind. Just two things come to my mind immediately. Number one, at one time I had a daughter who was 18 years old, and she was in college, and she was 19 and in college, and she was 20 and she was in college. I do not want her to be in a situation where she would need the security and safety and protection of a firearm because of the environment she found herself in. And fortunately, she went to a place where it was very safe and she didn't feel like she needed one. But I would hate for her to be in a situation where she needed a firearm for her own protection and could not get one. So that's number one. Our 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old daughters, I do not want them to be unable to protect themselves. And secondly, every 18-year-old male, and trust me, the way the trends are going with feminism, it's not going to be long before every 18-year-old female in America is going to have to register for the draft. So what has our legislature, Congress, what have they decided? They've decided that every 18-year-old male is old enough to use weapons. Because what's the first thing they do when they take them off for training? They get drafted. What do? They learn how to use guns. So to me, it's ridiculous. And the draft, that's everybody. You don't get that. You don't get to say, no, I don't feel like it today. If you get drafted, you go. They don't have a draft anymore. It's a voluntary army. But if we needed a draft, we had one for a time and we could need one again. And regardless, they've got to register with the Selective Service, which means they have to be prepared to be drafted. First thing they're going to do is be taught how to use a gun. So for those reasons, I think raising the age limit to 21 is just simply a non-starter. Now, here is a student. This is clip R2. His name is Alfonso Calderon, and he's on with Wolf Blitzer. And one of the problems that we have in all this gun debate, I've been alarmed at the fact that the talking snake media have resorted to the voices of children as if these children represented the wisdom of the ages, as if these children were speaking with the voice of Aristotle and Socrates and Immanuel Kant and Blaise Pascal. They don't. They're children. They have no life experience. They have no maturity. They have little to no adult experience. They have little wisdom. They're intellectually stunted, particularly because of the education that they have received. So they're completely unfamiliar with most of American and world history. And yet the left just fascinated with these children and Trump, trotting them out as if they represented the distilled wisdom of the ages, like they're fascinated with dictators. I mean, the left absolutely loves dictators. They salivate when they're in presence of a dictator, and I think it's because they want to be one. They envy the fact that he has so much control over the governmental levers of power in his country. Anyway, here is Alfonso Calderon on with Wolf Blitzer. Listen to what he says, and Wolf doesn't try to correct him.
And I'm glad that companies, which are what will stop the NRA from doing what they're doing, and basically killing kids, the companies are going to be the ones that are going to stop this. And I'm calling out every single company right now who is not in favor of cutting their ties with the NRA. The NRA has shown themselves to be toxic, vile, and to not support the right to live, which is in the preamble of the Constitution. I want them to remember, they always talk about the Second Amendment, but that preamble is before it because of its importance and its necessity for America to be the way it is.
Alfonso Calderon is a junior at the Stoneman Douglas High School. Today was the first day back at school. Alfonso, we'll continue these conversations down the road. Good luck to you. Good luck to all your friends at school, your families. We're with you. Thank you very much for joining us.
All right, so Wolf lets him say the NRA is killing kids. NRA is killing students. Wolf doesn't challenge him. Wolf doesn't correct him. Wolf doesn't challenge him. And by the way, the right to life is not in the preamble to the Constitution. It's in the Declaration of Independence. That's how uneducated these students are.
On American Family Radio, this is Barry McGuire. I'm a car guy here to help you understand God's purpose for your life through the eyes of a layman. There's a lot of talk today about fake news, and the question many people are asking is, so what are we supposed to believe? Well, there's nothing fake about the good news of the gospel. It's the very meaning of the word gospel, so why be hesitant to tell people good news? In fact, why not be the first to tell them? You have the best news in the history of mankind to share with everyone you meet today and every day. Most people you meet have no comprehension that God loves them. You do, and not only that, you know God wants them to spend eternity with Him in heaven. That's the good news, His gift of salvation. I mean, wow, but they have to hear it. So why hesitate? Let me rephrase that. Don't hesitate. Your job is to ignite revival outside the walls of your church by moving everyone every day closer to Jesus. If you need help doing that, go to rotw.com.
Here on American Family Radio, this is David Wolin with Haven Ministries, inviting you to anchor your day in God's Word. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. It's a familiar verse for many, but how do these words from Psalm 127 apply to your life? Clearly, this is more than the spirituality of construction work. And while you may not swing a hammer, you are building a house. It's a metaphor, a picture for all you're working for and the future you hope for. Safety, security, comfort. And who doesn't want those things out of life? But God wants each of us to know we are not our own providers. He is. Safety, security, comfort, it's all an illusion unless you find them in the place God intended, which is in Him. Get more daily encouragement from God's Word with the print edition of Anchor Devotional. Just visit getanchor.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. And what the student was talking about is you've got Dick's. They made a big deal out of the fact that they're not going to tell AR-15 rifles to kids under the age of 21. Well, they did that 6 years ago. They quit selling those guns in Dick's Sporting Goods 6 years ago. Now they've got a smaller chain. I forget the name of it. It's not Dick's, where they do sell AR-15s, and maybe they're going to stop selling them there. Walmart is going to stop selling to kids age 21, over the age of 21, and Kroger is going to do the same thing. But the thought that that's going to stop mass shootings in schools, just absurd. It's just ridiculous. It's just an absolute pipe dream. And Wolf Blitzer lets this kid get away with this outlandish, libelous, slanderous assertion that the NRA is out there killing kids. The NRA wants to protect kids. And they have the best idea. Let's get guns in the hands of responsible, trained gun owners who love kids like we do and want to see them protected. Now, here is the CEO of Dick's Sporting Goods. His name is Edward Stack. Remember, they haven't sold guns in Dick's Sporting Goods for 6 years. So he's kind of trying to hitchhike on something they did 6 years ago. Let's listen.
We think it's the right thing to do. We, after Parkland, we were so disturbed and saddened by what happened in Parkland that we said we need to do something. And we talked about what we needed to do, and we felt that we needed to make a statement that we will no longer sell assault-type rifles, high-capacity magazines, and a few other things. And our hearts went out to those kids and to their parents. And everybody talks about thoughts and prayers going out to them, and that's great. But that doesn't really do anything. And we felt that we needed to take a stand and do this.
Now, just to clarify, Dick's does still sell guns. They don't sell AR-15s, as what they have stopped doing. And it's interesting that he says thoughts and prayers don't really do anything. And I say, Mr. Stack, how would we know? We haven't tried it since 1963. How would we know that prayer doesn't work? And Neil deGrasse Tyson said, look, prayers do not stop bullets. And the response of a lot of people is, well, neither do gun control laws. So try that on for mental size. All right, let's go to Dick Blumenthal, clip number 4, Senator Dick Blumenthal. And again, we believe that the best solution is to put handguns, concealed carried weapons, in the hands of trained school personnel, coaches, administrators, and teachers who've been trained and are prepared to do it, have been trained in active shooter situations. And remember one of the things we said yesterday, this is a learn it, live it, love it lesson. What we are seeing is that liberals do not resist evil. They resist the people who do. Their opponents on the left, their opponents are the people that want to resist evil. The left does not want to do it. They refuse to resist evil, and they see somebody that's out there doing it, they're going to try to stop them. So they don't resist evil, they just resist the people that actually do. So here's Dick Blumenthal illustrating my point.
There's a real moment of opportunity here, and the president has to provide leadership, which so far he has not done. The solution here is not to arm teachers. That is toxic lunacy. It makes our schools less safe. And what's needed is a real agenda, giant strides, not baby steps like banning bump stocks, which is fine, or a minor fix to the present background check system, but extending that background system to all sales and purchases, and a ban on assault weapons, which are semi-automatics.
Well, this kid that shot up the school, he did not get his gun over the internet. He didn't get it at a garage sale, and that's what they're talking about. We got to have this background check on every sale, garage sale, backyard sale, internet sale. Well, this is not where these shooters got their guns. So, yeah, maybe it's a nice idea, entirely impractical, and it's just something that's not going to work.
I think what he said, a statement he said in that clip, is revealing to the fact that he said bump stocks are good, but there's where you get into what they really want is total abandonment of firearms in our nation.
Yeah, they want
it's swapping out. We're gonna, you can do that, but that's not really what we're after. Yeah. We want the guns.
Yeah, they want to disarm the American people. That's what the left wants to do. Don't let them lie to you. Don't let them fool you. I don't think I'm exaggerating. They want to disarm the American people, and if they can't disarm the American people, they want to make it as hard as humanly possible for us to be able to defend ourselves, because they don't resist evil. They only resist the people that do. All right, let's see if there's anything else I need to bring your way on the whole issue of gun control and guns. Let's not forget, by the way, got a big piece here, realclearinvestigations.com. Making the case that we've talked about earlier this week, that, the real culprit here is actually Barack Obama. Remember, this whole idea of this leniency policy, we're going to try to get away from arresting anybody for any reason at any time. That's Barack Obama. Cooked it up in 2013, and Broward County School District was one of the nation's leaders in implementing this policy. That's why Cruz was never arrested, even though he committed 3 crimes. They might have been misdemeanors, But the whole idea of this program is let's not even arrest kids for misdemeanors, and they wind up letting them get away with felonies like aggravated assault and theft and robbery and stuff like that. And this goes back to Barack Obama. This was his brilliant solution to reduce arrest rates in schools. And this, again, was because more blacks were being arrested in schools than whites. Well, there was a simple reason for that. More blacks than whites were committing crimes. So you would hope that more of them would be arrested if justice was being done. Remember, which is justice and liberty for all, same justice, same standards apply to everybody. The people who commit the crimes, they ought to be arrested. And if they happen to be predominantly of one race, as long as they're being arrested for criminal behavior, just like people of other races, there's nothing unfair about that. There's nothing racist about that. That's not racism. That is simply justice. But again, let's remember that this goes back to the wisdom of the light bringer, Barack Obama. In fact, I think you can trace some of the responsibility for these deaths at Parkland to the policies of Barack Obama. I'm not blaming him personally, but his policies, this leniency on providing justice for students who have been violated by other students, this goes back to Barack Obama. So what they did with these kids under Obama's benighted wisdom is instead of arresting kids, they would be sent to counseling. They'd participate in healing circles, obstacle courses, and other esteem-building exercises. So anyway, Minnesota's got a similar policy. There's a high school science teacher, for example, who was beaten and choked by a 16-year-old student. The student came up behind him, called him a name that was both a racist name and a profane name, put him in a stranglehold, bashed his head into a concrete wall and then on the pavement. And the instructor still suffers from short-term memory loss and hearing problems. And you know what the student got? 90 days of electronic home monitoring and anger management counseling. So let's remember that Obama is not exactly blame-free in all of this. Now, I want to get to a couple of sound bites on the Mueller investigation. Let's grab one from Tim Kaine, clip number 7. Remember, he was the vice presidential candidate for the Democrats in 2016, and this is really an astonishing admission that he makes. I don't hear anybody talking about this, but this is just an astonishing admission that Senator Kaine makes. Listen to this. Listen carefully.
I asked him, look, we failed. The history of 2016 is the U.S. was humiliated by a foreign adversary we failed to protect. I said the U.S. government failed to protect the U.S. democracy. And I asked Admiral Rogers, what is the source of that failure? And he basically cited two problems. He said, first, we did not view the electoral system as critical infrastructure. We protect the electricity grid, we protect financial institutions, but the government wasn't protecting the electoral system. And the second thing he said, and this was telling, he said, we underestimated the adversary. We thought when we told them, we know what you're doing, don't do it anymore, that they wouldn't persist. But Russia persisted, and there's a painful lesson there, but we're not yet acting to try to put into place what we've learned as a result of this failure.
You know, this business, don't do it anymore, and we thought they would cut it out. Remember, that's what Obama said to Putin. Cut it out. And Obama is so naive, so gullible, such a babe in the woods, he thought that Putin would stop. He thought that the magic of his presence, the august nature, the gravitas that he brought to that conversation, that Putin would be spooked. He would be frightened. He would be intimidated into cooperating. Well, he didn't. And so Mike Rogers said, look, we just underestimated. You know, and Tim Kaine says, look, we failed in 2016. We failed in 2016. We failed. Who's the we? Who was in charge of the American government in 2016? That was Barack Obama and the Democrats. So he says this was a catastrophic failure on the part of our government, that we failed. That was in 2016. That was the Democrats. So Tim Kaine admitting that the Democrats were utter failures at running this country because they were running the government in 2016. They were the we. You know, and don't forget, And why did they fail? Well, don't forget that Obama ridiculed Romney in the campaign in 2012 for thinking that Russia was a threat. Remember, he ridiculed Romney. The 80s called and they want their foreign policy back. You know, Obama's saying, look, the Russians we don't have to worry about the Russians anymore. It's Al-Qaeda we got to worry about. And Mitt, you're just behind the times. You're 30, 40 years behind the times. Well, it turns out that Mitt was right. Russia does represent a genuine geopolitical threat. Putin's out there banging on his pot and pants today. I don't know if you saw this. He says, we've got all kinds of nuclear weapons. We can shoot them from anywhere. We can shoot them from drones underwater. And we can evade any defense mechanism that anybody in the world has. So that's Putin rattling his saber. Focal Point, back with your call. Stay with us.
He was called America's pastor, but the ministry of Billy Graham had a tremendous effect for God's kingdom around the world. I'm Charles Morris. Won't you join me on our program Haven Today this week and a series called The Legacy of Billy Graham?
Haven Today, weekday mornings at 4:30 Central on American Family Radio. Listen online at afr.net.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman.
So who is responsible for the dysfunction in Washington? That's what we're going to be discussing today.
We have become one of the most litigious societies on the planet.
The goal of this show is to bring clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C., and to expose the deception that has plagued our nation's capital for decades.
Exposing Washington.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central.
On American Family Radio.
Oops, there's a piece I missed a little bit.
Grandpa, why do we always pick up litter when we go hiking?
Well, we're just making it nicer for people who come after us a little bit. It's called stewardship.
My grandfather taught me that you should always leave a place better than you found it. That it's important to invest in the lives of your children and grandchildren, leaving them with a godly legacy they can build on. That's why I decided to set up a charitable gift annuity with the AFA Foundation.
It's called stewardship.
I know that my gift will support a ministry that honors the biblical principles I hold dear, and it's a way to invest in the future of our country. The AFA Foundation also arranged for me to have a steady fixed income, so I don't have to worry in the midst of changing times.
Call the AFA Foundation today to find out how you can set up a charitable gift annuity. Just call 800-326-4543, extension 345.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Hi, welcome back to Focal Point. Brian Fisher is my name. Time for phone calls, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Talk about anything we talked about on the program today. A couple of quick sound bites before we get off of the Mueller investigation. Here is Matt Gaetz, clip number 8. This is brilliant what Matt Gaetz said. We talked about it yesterday, but I want you to hear it from him in his own words. Remember, Adam Schiff has been the guy that's been all over this thing, and he's gone to ground. Haven't hardly seen him. He's been on TV 227 times. You can hardly find the guy now because the winds have shifted. Anyway, Matt Gaetz, he's a Republican, does a brilliant thing here, clip number 8.
Mr. Speaker, in the United States of America, cash at a political party should never be convertible to a warrant to spy on American citizens. Because I expect Republicans and Democrats will both be in power at some point in the future, we should be looking for bipartisan solutions to revise the FISA process so that what happened to President Trump never happens to a future American president. So I went looking for solutions, and I found that in 2013, the gentleman from California, the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, wanted to give the President of the United States the power to appoint FISA judges. He argued that then judges would be more ideologically diverse. They'd come from different areas in the United States, and they would be subject to Senate confirmation. Today, I filed that legislation, and I would encourage the gentleman from California to join me as a co-sponsor so that we can advance bipartisan legislation to approve the FISA process because, Mr. Speaker, if it was good enough to give President Obama these powers, it's good enough to give President Trump these powers. I yield back.
So Adam Schiff, neither hide nor hair, won't even co-sponsor his own bill. won't co-sponsor the bill that he himself wrote. Very quickly, on the issue of whether Donald Trump is susceptible to being convicted of collusion or impeached on collusion, or whether there's any crime of collusion, two legal beagles, this is Jonathan Turley, law professor at George Washington School of Law. Here's what he had to say about this whole obstruction and collusion business.
You know, I've been skeptical about the obstruction claims for the last year. I just don't see the evidence of collusion. I don't see a crime connected to collusion. We've gone through a year of investigation. We have 5 cooperating witnesses. We have plea agreements and indictments all over the place. But they really don't establish any nexus to the campaign. What they do establish are other crimes, but those crimes are largely financial fraud, things like the allegations against Paul Manafort. I think those are likely to continue. We're likely to have more of the same.
Yeah.
But in terms of the collusion, it's all a bit implausible in my view.
So that guy's a legal expert. He says there is no evidence of collusion here whatsoever. There's no crime connected to a collusion. There's no nexus between any indictments that have been handed down and the Trump campaign. And the crimes that they're talking about are largely financial fraud. He wasn't even chartered to do that. That's not even a part of Mueller's charter. His job was to investigate connections of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. That was his charter. And you know, Paul Manafort's crimes go back to 2014. The campaign didn't even start until 2015. So those ought to be irrelevant to his charter. Now let's go to Ken Starr. Anybody ought to know about special prosecutors, special counsels? It's Ken Starr. He was the special prosecutor in the Clinton era. He's the one that got him impeached and all that. Here's what Ken Starr had to say about whether there's collusion here.
Well, it's impossible to tell, but there's no indication that it is heading to the Oval Office. In fact, to the contrary, you had Jonathan Turley on earlier today, and my goodness, he's so right. We've seen no evidence of collusion, which is what the Mueller investigation is to be all about. And I think there's a lot of symbolism in the fact that Rod Rosenstein briefed the president on the indictment from Friday a week ago, indicting the 13 Russians, individuals in the 3 companies. That is very significant. And again, not a word in that almost 40-page indictment about collusion. Nothing whatsoever.
Not a word about collusion, nothing whatsoever. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a dry hole. It's a myth. All right, let's go to the phones, 888-589-8840. Let us begin with Saeed in Columbus, Ohio. Saeed, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity. Good afternoon.
Yes, sir.
2 points really quickly. Appreciate your program. First, well, I think the Mueller thing is just a distraction from the people who have really used the power of the government to commit crimes. Just a distraction so that we get entertained until all the time passes and such a person as Trump or the opposite side who could do anything about it run out of time. That's one. And then 2, you know, it costs taxpayers about $90,000 to keep a convicted murderer, $90,000, keep them at least in jail for a year. You know, what example are we really setting for the kids? That don't worry about it. They'll just kill somebody. They will give you life imprisonment, and then they will force the taxpayers, including the families of the murdered victim, to continue to pay for your well-being while you're in jail. Just do it, no problem. Claim lunacy, you'll be fine. Look, let them restore death sentence. Look, why are these people, when they shoot up places, why are they always running? They don't want to die either. You know, so if you put the death sentence on the table, you kill somebody, and it is established that you did it, then you forfeit your life according to the law of the land. How many people really want to think about killing somebody? They will want to do it, but you see, they will think twice about it. Thanks for the...
Absolutely, Saeed, and that's exactly what the Bible says in Ecclesiastes 8:11. This is what Solomon says in Ecclesiastes 8:11. If I can get there, because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil. So if you exact a sentence and you don't carry it out, it's 15 years, You exact the death penalty, but it's 18, 19 years for the guy. It's useless. It has no deterrent effect. You know, and this guy's already admitted to the crime. He's already confessed to the crimes. So the reality is, this shooter, this guy that has been apprehended and is in jail right now, he should be executed, should have been executed by now. There's no reason to wait. He's admitted he did it. What more evidence do you need? But again, this guy will languish in the court system for years and years and years and decades and decades. They've already made a deal with him that if he will confess in court, he's not going to get execution, not going to get the death penalty. Florida is a death penalty state. He's going to get life in prison. You know, like Saeed says, you know, it's if you're facing a choice between death and time in prison with 3 hots and a cot and TV and all that kind of stuff, that might sound pretty good as an alternative to death. Let's go to DB in Arkansas. DB, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yeah, Brian, I had a couple of quick points, too. Number one, about the minimum age for buying a gun. You know, it's you got to have a learner's permit to drive when you're 14 so you can be taught how to respect the vehicle and use it properly. The same principle applies with the gun. You need to start when you're young and have adult supervision to learn to respect the gun, use it properly.
Absolutely.
So, and the media they just know how to play on the emotions. My son went out with his high school buddy a few weeks ago squirrel hunting, and if they'd have been spinning hookers and gotten a wreck and got killed, there wouldn't have been, much done about it. But if one of them had shot the other, well, it'd been all over the news. So that the emotion plays a big part in it.
Yeah. All right, I appreciate that, DB. You know, it'd be a topic for another day, but it's interesting talking about getting a learner's permit. You know, you wonder if something like that would work with guns, or maybe, because the NRA, they train people on handling guns all the time. What if they set up a nationwide system of giving teenagers, 14, 15, 16 years old, a learner's permit on a gun? So when they got to the age where they could buy a gun, 17, 18, they could take this learner's permit to the gun shop and demonstrate that they were capable. Maybe between 18 and 21, you make sure they bring a learner's permit. All right, let's go to Michael, Vidalia, Louisiana. Welcome, Michael. What's on your mind?
Oh, praise the Lord, Brian. I got, first, I request permission to come aboard.
Permission
and
granted.
I just want to quick now before I get to what I want to ask. Someone had said not for you to be the first mate, and about the executive officer.
Yes, sir.
The executive officer is the second in command on any naval ship. The captain or the skipper is the one who is as far as in the chain of command. He is the one that is there on the aircraft carrier. The admiral sits above the captain. So therefore, the 7-8 ships that's in the battle group, the admiral is over that there. Then it's the captain, then the executive officer. And on focal point, if you're the executive officer and God is your captain or your pilot, then you're the co-pilot. You are the second in command here, so to say. What I want to ask is about the creation. If we're going to, I'm a preacher. I'm an ordained minister. And I don't believe in evolution as Darwin has put it all out, or any of the Marxists or any of them there. My question is, if we're going to go down the road and just believe that the world as we know it is only 6,000 years old or a little over, then how do we explain 2 Peter chapter 3 and 5, 6, and 7, where Peter even asked a question of by which the world that then existed perished? What world is he talking about? And also, when was Lucifer kicked out of heaven, because he reigned here on this earth before Adam? Now, and that is described and told, laid out to us in the book of Isaiah, and I think Ezekiel or Jeremiah.
Yeah. Well, listen, Michael, I'm running out of time here, so I'm sorry to cut you off. I'd love to hear more of what you have to say. I would say when it comes to the issue of the world that was existing at that time was destroyed, he's talking about the world prior to the flood. That world, all its inhabitants, all of its animals, that world was destroyed by the flood, and a new one came into being. The post-flood world came into being. I think that's the world that was destroyed in 2 Peter 3. All right, well, that's it for today. You might disagree with me, but we can talk about it another time. That's it for today. Don't forget to bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap, never forget, we are, with God's help, fighting a winnable war. See you back here tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio. American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day, but it can also wake you up to the idea of supporting the American Family Association through a product you'd normally buy anyway. Choose from morning blend, evening blend, and everything in between.